Karlsruhe, Germany, an endearing city in the heart of Europe. The people of southern Germany are among the friendliest anywhere, and many were great inventors and innovators. For example, this is the home of the first bicycle and of the first Mercedes-Benz automobile. Especially attractive are the beautiful green, relaxing grounds throughout the city. Karlsruhe has the most parks and gardens of anywhere in Europe. Did you know that before becoming president, Thomas Jefferson visited Europe, and while here, he studied the architecture of Karlsruhe? Many of the design elements were integrated into the design of Washington, D.C. For example, all the streets radiate from the Capitol, and in Karlsruhe, they radiate from the magnificent palace. The largest company in Karlsruhe is Pfaff Sewing Machine Corporation, the biggest manufacturer of sewing machines, famous for high quality and innovative technology worldwide. Creative 1475 CD opens a whole new world of sewing for all your crafts and wearables. Create a look as bold as your imagination with an incredible palette that challenges your creativity.
Hi, my name is Philip Pepper, and this is Crystal Thoma. We're part of the education and training staff for Pfaff, and we'd like to welcome you to the exciting world of the incredibly versatile Pfaff Creative 1475 CD.
We'll start by sharing some basics about your machine, then building on them by using some of the pre-programmed stitches, putting them into memory with the 8-way feed to create new stitches and designs. And I've got some great basic sewing tips to share with you.
And I'll show you some embroidery techniques, as well as how to get the most out of the standard accessory feet that came with your machine.
Oh, Philip, I can't wait. Let's get started. Time to thread up.
Thread is a great place to start because there's so many more types available to us today. For one thing, I like to match the weight of the thread to the size of the needle. For basic and utility sewing on a medium weight fabric, I always choose a size universal 80. For heavier fabrics, I move up in size to a 90 or 100. For lighter weight fabrics, I go down in size to a 70 or a 60. This is a good rule of thumb, but there are exceptions.
That's right, Philip. For example, when I'm sewing on a densely woven silk or a sand wash silk, I'll use a 70-10 jeans needle. That's because the jeans needle has a very sharp point and will pierce the fabric weave. If you've had problems with skip stitches and you know you have a new needle, change to a jeans needle in a corresponding size. Also, bent and worn needles can be the cause of poor stitch quality. You need to change your needle frequently. And if I've been sewing a lot of embroidery or maxi stitches, I'll put a new needle in to construct my garment.
We're also going to be looking at some specialty needles in this video in Volume 2, as well as some special threads. For example, this rayon machine embroidery thread by Mez. We'll also look at YLI's Candlelight and Madeira's Decor. But don't forget good old Coates & Clark, who makes a line of all-purpose dual-duty sewing thread, as well as pearl cotton.
I can't wait, Philip. Let's go to the machine and try these out. Place the thread on the spool pin and secure it with one of the unreeling discs. Match the size of the unreeling disc to the size of the spool.
There is one exception, though. When the spool is notched like this Coates & Clark dual duty, always use the large unreeling disc.
Then bring the thread from the spool through the thread guide as shown on the mauve section of the machine, through the take-up lever, and through the guide just above the eye of the needle. Then, through the eye of the needle.
That needle threader is so quick and easy. You did that so fast that I'm sure we'd all like to see it again.
Sure, Philip. The easiest way for me is to bring the thread to the left and catch it under the hook like this. Then I move it to the right and hold it with my right hand. With my left hand, I lower the needle threader and move it forward through the eye of the needle. I then catch the thread under the little hook and slowly release the needle threader back to its original position. It's that easy.
There are two ways to wind the bobbin on your machine. With either method, you must first place the bobbin on the winder and pull out the tension disc. Bring the thread from the spool to the first silver guide and under the tension disc, around the guide behind the tension disc, and then over to the bobbin. Wrap the thread several times and push the bobbin to the right to engage the winder.
Make sure you disengage the hand wheel by holding the large outer wheel and turning the small inner wheel counterclockwise.
Now just press the foot control. The bobbin will stop winding automatically when it's full. Push the bobbin to the left, clip your threads, and you're ready to go. Don't forget to re-engage the hand wheel.
I prefer to wind my bobbins directly from the needle, but only use this method with a metal sewing foot. With the hand wheel disengaged and a bobbin on the winder, I take the thread from under the presser foot and up to the thread guide. Since the thread is already going through the needle, you bypass the bobbin tension disc. Bring the thread through the V cutout and behind the tension disc in the back. Wrap the thread around the bobbin clockwise several times and wind as usual. When the bobbin is full, engage the hand wheel. Hold the bobbin so the threads unwind clockwise like this. Insert the bobbin into the case. When you pull the threads, the bobbin should turn clockwise. Then insert the bobbin directly onto the pin until you hear it click into place.
Crystal, before we go on, I'd like to explain the keys and all their functions.
That's a good idea, Philip. Why don't you explain the keys over the needle area and I'll explain the keys on the right.
The first key on the left is the needle down up key. Press the key and the light is lit. Now every time you stop, the needle will remain in the fabric. To raise the needle out of the fabric, just press it again. The light goes out and the needle raises out of the fabric to its highest position. The next key is the sew slow key. That's why it has a snail on it. When you press this key, the light is lit and the machine sews at half speed. Press it again and return to full speed ahead. The light goes out. The next key is the buttonhole tie-off key. This key has two functions. When you're programming your own size buttonhole, you'd use this key to determine where the bar tack should be placed. You'll learn about this later in the video when we show buttonholes. The tie-off function of this key can be used with utility and decorative sewing. Press the key before you start to sew. The light is lit. The machine automatically takes several stitches to knot and then sews the selected stitch program. If you press the key while you're sewing, the machine finishes the program, ties off, and stops. This is a great way to secure the ends of seams. The last key on the right is the reverse key. It also has two functions. If you press the key, the light is lit. The machine will sew constantly in reverse until you press the key again and the light goes out. If you touch the key and hold the key while sewing, the machine will sew in reverse only as long as you hold the key down. The second function is to determine and memorize the length of the darning program number 158 and 159. I've finished the explanation of the keys over the needle, so Crystal, why don't you take it from here?
Okay, Philip. I like to think of the right side of the machine as control center. They allow you to select stitches, change them, put them into memory, sew one, mirror image, and more. Control center even suggests presser feet, tension, and much more. Let's start with the top row of keys, beginning with the left set of keys. The first keys under the letters P, R, O, G are a double set that work together. You use them to select a program number. Choose a stitch program from the program chart located on the inside of the lid. Let's, for example, choose program 31. The left set allows me to select the program number by 10 digits at a time. See the display change as I press the plus key 3 times to select number 30. The right key allows me to select program numbers by single digits. I'll press the plus key once. Oh, I've pressed it too many times, but no problem. I'll just press the single digit minus key to go back. Now it's okay. You can use the left plus and minus keys to go up and down through the numbers and the alphabet styles. You use the right plus and minus keys to go up and down by single digits or letters. The next set of keys controls stitch width. The machine has pre-selected a stitch width of 9 millimeters for program 31. By pressing the minus key like this, I can reduce the stitch width to 8 millimeters or less, or increase the width back to 8 millimeters. The machine selects a stitch width to start but allows you to change it. The next set of keys controls stitch length. They work just like the width keys. Watch the display change as I press the keys. The plus makes the stitches longer and the minus makes the stitches shorter. It's that easy to change the stitch settings. Let's select program 41. When the light above the stitch length key is lit, then it controls pattern length. Let's pause for a minute to discuss the difference between stitch length and pattern length. Stitch length is the distance between two stitches. A straight stitch with a 3 millimeter length would have 3 millimeters between each stitch. The same holds true for the next example, a zigzag stitch with 3 millimeters between each zig and zag. The next is an example of pattern length with program 41, a leaf. Notice the different sizes of leaves. Pattern length refers to the overall length of one single pattern and not the distance between individual stitches within that pattern. The first leaf is a size 10, the middle leaf is a size 14, and the last leaf is a size 20. To recap, if the light is lit over the stitch length key, it will now change the pattern length, not the stitch length. The next set of keys are the balance keys. They have 3 functions. When you see a 0 in the display over the keys like this, you can use the keys to adjust the balance of a pattern. When you adjust the balance of a pattern, you're lengthening or shortening the reverse stitches. The plus key lengthens the reverse stitches, therefore shortening the pattern length. The minus key shortens the reverse stitches, therefore lengthening the pattern. Let's look at an example using program 90. The first row on the left is sewn without any changes. The center row has the balance changed to -7. The right row has had the balance changed to +4. You can use the balance key to correct the stitching of programs or change the look completely. When the light above the key is lit, the balance key will change the pattern length while keeping the same stitch density. I'll select program 61 as an example. This is a scallop. The first row is a size 10 scallop. The middle row is a size 16 scallop, and the last row is a size 20 scallop. Notice that the stitch density of the scallops doesn't change when we've changed the pattern length. All the scallops have the same satiny look, they're just different lengths. So, when the light is lit and you see a number other than 0 in the display, you can use the balance key to change the pattern length. Program 61 comes up with a number 18 in the display. Press the plus key to lengthen the pattern and the minus key to shorten the pattern. The third function of the balance key is to check the stitch counter of a P memory. The last key in the row is the display key. This key has 3 functions. When you are sewing with any of the pre-programmed stitches and you press the key, the display window will show you the built-in instruction book. The first symbol tells you if you should use dual feed. The next tells you your thread tension setting, and the last, which presser foot to use. It's a great convenience. If you've selected any of the programs from 200 through 222 or the Maxi Monograms, the first touch of the display key will present the Q balance or the sideways balance. You can adjust the sideways balance of these stitches in just the same way you adjusted the reverse balance. Press the key again and the instruction book is displayed. Press again and the basic stitch settings are displayed. When you've programmed a sequence into an end memory that is longer than the display window can accommodate, press the display key and the end memory sequence will revolve in the window. This is a great feature. It allows you to check your spelling before you sew. Let's go on to the bottom row and start on the right side. The first key is the pattern start key. Notice the symbol. It's a single arrow pointing to the beginning of a pattern. Touch this key and the machine will sew the stitch program from the beginning. If you are programming an end memory and touch this key, it will take you back to the last stitch program you entered and display the changes. In programmable stitches like darning and buttonhole programs, this key will clear the memory of the memorized size. The next key is the single pattern key. Notice the symbol. It's a single pattern with two arrows, one pointing to the start and one to the end of a pattern. When you engage this key, the light is lit and the machine will sew one stitch program, one end memory, or one P memory sequence. The key remains engaged and the light lit until you touch it again to disengage it. The next key is the mirror image key. Notice the symbol. It's two patterns flipped sideways. Anytime you want to flip a pattern sideways, engage this key. It also has a light that remains lit until you touch the key again. The next key is the twin needle key. Its symbol is two needles. When this key is engaged, the machine reduces the stitch width by 2 millimeters. Here too is a light to remind you that you have the key engaged. The remaining keys work with the memories on your 1475 CD. The memory key functions as a pattern start key with end memories and a search and display key to correct stitches in the P memories.
Your Creative 1475 allows you to enter a code to prevent unauthorized use of your machine. To enter the code, first turn the machine off.
Now, while holding the memory key, turn the machine back on. Philip, let's take a closer look at this.
The display shows the word code and 3 zeros, one each over the width, length, and balance keys. The triple zeros mean that a code is not needed. Use the width key to change the first digit. I'll put in an A. Use the length key to select the second digit. I'll put in a B. And the balance key selects the last letter. I'll use a C. Now my code reads ABC. To sew, touch the display key. Now the program 00 is displayed. Turn the machine on and off. The display now has 3 question marks. You must enter your code to activate the machine. We do this in the same way as before. A, B, C. If I touch the display key, I can sew again, but I want to remove the code totally. To do this, touch the memory key and you now see the 3 zeros are back.
It's a good idea to write your code down or use something easy to remember. I forgot my code once and I was in a total panic, but I finally solved it. I took the batteries out of my machine for about 2 hours. And the machine forgot my code, but it also forgot my memories. I had to start over from scratch. I won't forget my code again. But let's move on to dual feed and utility stitching. Philip, when do you use dual feed?
Oh, Crystal, I use it most of the time. A few exceptions are when I do free motion work or embroidery stitches. For basic utility and construction sewing, I always engage the dual feed. If you've never had a machine before with dual feed, this is what we're talking about, the little black elbow behind the presser foot. To engage the dual feed, press down on the elbow like this. To disengage, hold the dual feed with 2 fingers. Pull down, then to the back and up. It's so easy. Engage, disengage, engage, disengage.
Dual feed is great for matching stripes and plaids, and I always use dual feed when I'm sewing on a slippery fabric like this silky. It eliminates the puckering without having to fuss with the tension. Let me show you. First, I'll sew a seam without dual feed. Now I'll engage dual feed and not make any other changes. See, a perfect seam. Let me show you how easy it is to sew over very heavy seams. I've sewn a mock flat felled seam in this denim, folded it into thirds, and I'll now sew down the middle. See how easily dual feed climbed right over that thick seam? I use dual feed even when I sew in a zipper. First, remove the foot by pressing on the toe. The zipper foot has 3 projections in the back, and those must be in the back when you attach the foot. Simply place it left or right of the presser bar and lower the presser bar over the foot. The foot will then snap into place. Notice the needle is too far from the edge to sew in a zipper. The solution is to use program 01. Look at the stitch program chart on the inside lid. Program number 01 has an arrow pointing to the right. This means that when the stitch is selected, the needle will be in the extreme left position and can be moved to the right. Use the stitch width key to move the needle. Program number 03, a reverse straight stitch, has the same arrow, so it can be moved the same way. But look at programs 4 and 5, stretch stitches, and 8, a saddle stitch. They have an arrow that points both left and right. When these stitches are selected, the needle will be in the center position and can be moved either left or right. I've already taken the zipper foot off, and I'll now install foot OA. As I push the stitch width button, watch the needle move across to the right. I can even use the mirror image key to flip back and forth quickly. These programs with multiple needle positions give me the versatility to sew accurately spaced seams. With program 04, I'll add a second row of top stitching to this pocket. See how evenly spaced? Because of the triple stitching, not only will this make for heavier top stitching, but the seam won't snap when sewn on knits.
Before we leave straight stitching, I'd like to show you how to use foot number 7, a hemmer. This foot needs center needle position, so select program 00 and snap on the foot.
See this scroll at the front of the foot? It rolls the fabric under to form the hem. The easiest way to get the fabric into the scroll is to fold under 1/8 of an inch twice. Place the fabric under the foot and engage needle down, and sew a few stitches. Lift the presser foot and draw the fabric up into the scroll of the foot. Guide the raw edge of your fabric with your right finger and keep the index finger of your left hand at the spot where the fabric rolls. This takes a little practice, but well worth the effort.
There is also a 2mm hemmer foot, which is just like the 3mm hemmer foot that came with your machine. Both work well with fine, lightweight fabrics such as organdy and batiste. This is a 4mm hemmer foot with a cutout for the dual feed. This works well with lightweight and a little bit heavier fabrics. All hemmer feet work best when the fabric has been cut on the straight of the grain. But the 4mm hemmer foot will hem a shirt tail if it is not severely curved.
You know, we've all used a zigzag stitch to overcast seams or applique, and your Creative has several types of zigzag, each with its own special use. All the utility stitches are grouped together in this white area on the stitch chart just below the alphabet styles. Now, your basic zigzag is program number 10, but I used program number 12 to applique on this sweatshirt, what I like to call the Zorro stitch. Let me show you why it has that name. The example on the left has a stitch length of 2 millimeters. When the needle zigs to the right, it makes a perfectly horizontal stitch. When it zags back to the left, it's on an angle. The stitch formation looks like the letter Z. When you shorten the stitch length to 0.6 millimeters, you get a very even satin stitch, like the one in the middle here. The satin stitch on the right was sewn with program number 10, the basic zigzag. The stitch length had to be shortened much more than the Zorro stitch did, down to 0.3 millimeters, so you're using less thread to get a prettier satin stitch when you use the Zorro stitch. Zigzag program number 10 is a centered stitch, By this I mean that when you decrease the width, it decreases evenly from the center inward. When you increase the width, it increases evenly from the center outward. Zigzag program number 11 has a constant on either the left or the right. Let's take a look at this. I've selected program 11. Notice that the needle is in the extreme right position. Watch what happens when I engage the mirror image key. The needle jumps from the right to the left side. I'll sew a bit so you can see how it looks on fabric. Now I'll disengage the mirror image key and sew with the needle on the right. You can see the difference between the two sets of stitches. This stitch can be tapered while you're sewing for embroideries or appliques. Program 13 is really two stitches, 13A and 13B. The A version is a 3-step zigzag and the B version a 2-step. This means that when the zigs and zags are sewn, they're done in either 2 or 3 steps. This makes for a lot of elasticity and great for sewing knits or elastic. Let's see how this works. First, I'll take a few stitches into the fabric to secure the elastic. I'll hold on to the thread in the back until the fabric is well under the foot. Now I'm stretching the elastic in the front and attaching it to my fabric like this. Because I used my dual feed, I didn't have to hold the elastic tight from the back. The dual feed did the work for me. See how nice the elastic looks? The last two zigzag stitches are program 06, a slanted zigzag, and program 07, a triple slanted zigzag. And they're great for sewing seams in fabrics with a lot of lycra or spandex. But I use them a lot when I embroider. For example, here's an embroidery I did using built-in stitches and a P memory. We'll duplicate it later when we talk about decorative sewing, but for now, Philip, why don't you show us some blind hemming?
All right, Crystal. Blind hemming can be real quick and easy on the machine when you use foot number 3. The key to getting a good blind hem is this little red adjustable guide on the front of the foot. The other two things you need to know is how to adjust the bite of the needle into the fold and how to fold the fabric. Now let's go back to the machine and I'll finish folding the fabric and check the bite of the needle.
Fold the hem with the fabric under like this. Make sure you have about 1/4 to 1/2 inch of the hem exposed. Place the fabric under the presser foot with the fold against the red guide on the foot. To check the bite, use the hand wheel to lower the needle into the fold. If the needle bites too far into the fabric, turn the thumb screw and move the red guide to the left. Check the bite again. When you have adjusted it perfectly, the needle will bite into the fold and make a stitch only across one thread of the fabric. This is the ideal setting. If you prefer, you can test the bite automatically. Unthread the needle and take one stitch with the foot control. This program was designed with the bite as the first stitch. So after you've adjusted the guide and you want to test the bite again, just touch pattern start and the needle is set to take the bite. I'll sew this sample hem for you. This will take a little practice. Let's look at another method. This is what I call a whipped hem. It resembles a hand stitch hem and is a little easier to sew. Prepare your hem the same way as before, but when you turn the hem under, only expose about 1/16 of an inch, like this. Adjust the red guide so it is exactly even with the needle on the bite stitch. Notice that there isn't any of the hem extending under the metal pin. You will be sewing on air, but don't worry, your creative can do this. Watch. Doesn't that look like a hand-sewn hem? Don't you just love that blind hem, Crystal?
Oh, I do, Philip, and that whipped hem as well. Those are great techniques. Look at this knit fabric I have here. It's so comfortable, it's no wonder it's so popular right now.
And they're so easy to sew, even if you're not lucky enough to own a hobby like Serger. You have several stitches on your Creative 1475 just for knit fabrics. You're sure to find one that'll sew the knit seam perfectly. They also make great seams for woven fabrics.
That's right, Philip. For example, let me show you how easy it is to sew a piece of ribbing into a t-shirt neck. First, cut your ribbing according to the pattern instruction. You can leave the 5/8" seam and trim it away after you sew, or do as I do. I prefer to trim mine away before. Next, you'll have to quarter your ribbing and the front and the back. Then you'll match your pins, pin your ribbing to the neckline, and sew. Let's go to the machine. Select program 25 and snap on the blind hem foot. The metal pin on this foot will keep the seam from tunneling. As I sew, I'll guide the raw edge against that pin, but not under it, and I'll stretch the ribbing to match the neckline. Watch. This stitch sews a stretchable seam and overcasts it at one time. And look how neat it looks on the inside and how pretty on the outside. Any of the programs 20 through 29 will sew a stretchable seam and overcast at the same time.
That blind hem foot is a real versatile foot. Next, we're going to be working with a very specialized foot. It's our buttonhole foot number 5A. It's a sliding foot with hooks on the front and the back for making corded buttonholes. Take a piece of cording about 8 inches long and fold it in half. Place the fold over the hook in the back of the presser foot. Hold the cording firmly and pull it up through the hook in the center. Make sure it's snug. I like the cording to match the thread color I'm working with, and sometimes that's hard to find. So next I'm going to show you a technique that will assure a perfect match every time. Make sure you have the dual feed engaged. This is very important. Select program 10 and change the width to 4 millimeters. I've already pulled out 6 strands of thread about 12 inches long. The 6 strands now go under the presser foot. Hold on to the back of the threads and let the zigzag stitch bundle the strands together. As soon as the bundled threads pass under the dual feed, you can let them go. The dual feed will feed the cording evenly from under the presser foot. Keep your finger on the loose threads in front of the presser foot to guide them. A perfectly matched piece of cording and inexpensive too. If you need a heavier cord, just use more filler thread. Now snap off the standard foot and disengage the dual feed. Snap on the buttonhole foot. Be sure the foot is all the way forward. All of the pre-programmed buttonhole styles work the same way. I'll select program 150, a pre-programmed bar tack buttonhole. The bar tack is the most widely used style of buttonhole. The machine selected a 22 millimeter size buttonhole. I would like a smaller buttonhole, so I'll change the size to 18 millimeters by pressing the stitch length minus key. I can even change the width of the buttonhole by pressing the stitch width key. Since this is a pre-programmed style, the only thing I have to do is press the foot control. The machine will sew the buttonhole, tie off, and stop. Now I will pull on the cording until the loop disappears. After the loop has disappeared, pull a little tighter until the buttonhole forms a curve. Then clip the cording at the bottom of the buttonhole and flatten it out. This will ensure that the clipped cord disappears into the bar tack. Next, I'll make my own program size buttonhole. After selecting program 150, press the right plus program key once to advance to program 150 with the broken flashing 0. The 0 signifies a buttonhole program that you can program in the length. Program 151, a reinforced stretch buttonhole, and program 152, A stretch buttonhole also have this programmable feature. When you depress the foot control, the machine sews the right bead of the buttonhole toward you. When you reach the length you want, touch the buttonhole tie-off key above the needle. The light will not go on. The machine makes the first bar tack and starts to sew the second bead in reverse. As it approaches the starting point, the machine cuts the speed so you can easily watch for the exact starting point. When it's even, touch the buttonhole tie-off key again. This buttonhole is now in memory and you can make as many as you like. If the size isn't quite right, just press the pattern start key to clear the memory and start again. You can also cancel the second bar tack on any buttonhole. Touch the buttonhole tie-off key to cancel the second bar tack. Notice the flashing dash in the display window. This indicates that you have canceled the second bar tack. The machine will sew the right bead, the first bar tack, then slow its speed on the left bead when it nears the beginning so you can determine where to place the bar tack. Sew the buttonhole until the machine slows down. Touch the buttonhole tie-off key. The machine will bar tack, tie off, and stop. Once you cancel the second bar tack, it will remain canceled until you reselect a buttonhole program.
But don't think of buttonholes as purely functional. Look at this vest. Here I've used buttonholes to create a really unique garment. Here I've sewn some corded buttonholes and left the tails to dangle. Others I've sewn on scraps of ultra suede, and some I've just left plain. A really great way to take your practice piece and turn it into something really pretty. And I've added buttons too, sewn all automatically. Let's go to the machine and we'll sew on some buttons. Select program 19. The pre-selected width is 4 millimeters. This is the common distance between the two holes in any button. If your button is of an unusual size, you will need to check the swing manually. Notice that the light is lit above the single pattern key. This means the machine will sew one complete sequence. First, it ties off in the left needle position, zigzags across the two holes, then ties off and stops, ready for the next button. You could use foot number 2A or no foot at all like I'm doing. And you don't have to lower the feed dogs since the machine has programmed them not to feed the fabric at all. Watch. Just that easy. Now, if you're sewing a button that needs a shank on a coat or a blazer, you might want to do this. I use an old needle on top of the button between the holes and lower the presser foot on top of it. It also helps to have a little Scotch tape to keep everything into place. Simply line up the button manually with a hand wheel and sew. Since the machine tied off, I don't even have to secure the threads underneath.
That vest really takes the very ordinary and turns it into something special, Crystal.
It does, Philip, but then so does that purse. It looks like brocade fabric.
But it's really not. It's just plain fabric with thread and built-in stitches. It's another example of how your utility stitches can be used decoratively. This is half of program number 159. I'll show you how to program that in and how to make this fabric. Place the fabric under the foot and start sewing. The machine sews with tiny stitches from the left, straight across to the right, takes one stitch forward, then stitches back across to the left and takes that one stitch forward again. Now it repeats this sequence for as long as I want. When I reach the length I want, I press the reverse key over the needle. Now the machine sews backwards and forwards until it covers the previous stitching. then ties off and stops. When I stitched the bag, I wanted a heavy fabric feel, so I fused a non-woven iron-on interfacing on the back of the chintz. This also stabilized the fabric so I could embroider on it. The trick here is to only use the first half of the darning stitch. Don't touch the reverse key. Let's take a closer look at these stitches. The first stitch on the left is program 159, sewn as you would for darning. The next one is program 159 without the reverse stitching, the way it was used on the bag. The last stitch is the other darning program, number 158. Notice the differences. The darning stitch on the right only sews backward and forward, whereas the one on the left sews left to right also.
I like the way you turned a utility stitch into a decorative one, Philip. That was very clever. I thought I was being so clever with my buttonhole vest. Well, I guess we're just on the same wavelength. I hope you try some of these ideas with your Pfaff. It'll make learning about your new machine a lot of fun. And speaking about learning, how about a spelling lesson?
Crystal, spelling was my worst subject in school, but if you mean on the creative, you teach away.
All right. Here's a vest I like to call my favorite things. I've written all over it with things that are important to me. Oh, like friends' names and sayings and music. I used the outline alphabet, much in the same way the purse was made. The alphabet styles are located here, inside the lid on the stitch chart, in the white area, just above the utility stitches. If you look, you'll see that the alphabet styles don't have program numbers. They start with symbols. They start with 2 dashes or an equal sign. After the dashes, there will be a lowercase letter to designate the style of alphabet. I know this is the lowercase script because the dashes are close together and the style symbol is a small a. Only lowercase script has dashes that are close together. The next program has the same letters, but the dashes are far apart, so this is the uppercase script. The next program are the script numbers. You can tell this because in place of the capital A, there is a 0. The next program shows a small b after the dashes, and this designates the block alphabet. The next program has a 0, so it's the block numbers. The next program, a small c, that means it's the outline alphabet. And the next one has a 0 for the outline numbers. The next program shows a small d after the dashes. This designates the double straight stitch script. And the next one, a 0, so it's the double straight stitch numbers. I'll sew my name from memory. First, I need to select an empty M memory by pressing the left program keys. There. The next thing you must do is tell the machine you want to enter a program, and you do this by touching the Mem+ key. Now we're ready to enter any combination we wish. I'll select the block alphabet, and remember, that was the one with the small letter B. Now to select the individual letters, I'll use the right program keys. There's a C. To enter the C, press the Mem+ key. Notice that the length and width settings have changed to a parentheses and the letter C. This marks the beginning of an M memory sequence. Now I'll enter the rest of my name. R Y S T A L. I only want to sew it once, so I'll engage the single pattern key. Touch the memory key, and we're ready to sew. I'll sew my name now. It looks great. Now I'll program and sew your name next, Philip, and this time I'll use upper and lowercase letters. Here's the uppercase script. First I'll select a P. Now I'll select the lowercase script and finish spelling Philip's name. H I L I P. Notice that the first letter is much bolder than the others. That's because it's uppercase. So you can see it in the display window if you've selected the correct alphabet style. And again, I'll engage the single pattern key and touch memory to begin sewing. I'll sew now. The next step would be to clip the connecting threads, like this. What do you think, Philip? Elegant, huh?
Now I'd like to show you how to enter programs using your Creative Designer in the programming cards. The number is located at the top in the left-hand side, right here. I'm using program card number 2 because I want to use the outline alphabet. Insert the card into the front of the Creative Designer and center it. If your machine is turned on, you need to turn it off. Plug the Creative Designer into the left-hand side of your machine. Move the magnifier around the outside of the Creative Designer to orientate the CD and your machine. You should do this every time you use the Creative Designer. The display window shows 3 dashes on the left side, CD prog in the middle, and 2 flashing dashes on the right side. The flashing dashes are the machine's way of asking which program card you want to use. Move the magnifier slide over the number 2 at the top left. In the display, the 3 dashes have been replaced by the number 2. Now press the M+ key on the Creative Designer, not the machine. The display has changed again. The number 2 has jumped to the right side. This means the machine knows that you're using card number 2 to enter programs into memory. We're ready to enter. This smart machine has already selected the first empty M memory, so I can start programming right away. Let's enter Pfaff 1475 CD with a flower at the end. We'll be using the right-hand side of the card since that's where the outline alphabet is. Move the magnifier over the letter P.
Notice that the small c alphabet and the letter P, the width, and the balance are shown in the display window. Sliding the magnifier slide over the letter only selects or displays it. It is not entered into memory yet.
To enter, simply touch the Mem+ key on the Creative Designer. The display changes again. This time it shows the alphabet symbols next to parentheses and then the letter P. This indicates that the letter has been entered. Enter the rest of the sequence in the same way. The F, the A, and the F twice. Remember to press the Mem+ key after each letter you've selected. Now I need a space and it's in the 4th row. Move the magnifier to the bottom row to select your numbers. 1, 4, 7, 5, and back up to C, D. To enter the flower, we'll use the numbers in the column on the left. Move the slide over the number 4 and press the Mem+ key. Now over the 0 and press the key. You need to press the Mem+ key once more to enter into memory. To tell the machine that you're finished programming and want to sew, touch the memory key on the machine. At this point, you can disconnect the CD if you like. I've selected single pattern and I'll finish sewing. same results as crystal, but a quicker way to enter. The choice is up to you. Crystal, I have a really beautiful fabric card here using our alphabet, and it looks like you have some other ideas also.
I do, Philip. Here's the skirt you hemmed for me earlier. I put an elastic waist in it for comfort, but I was having a little trouble telling the front from the back, so I solved it by sewing the word front into the inside center front of the waistband. That's a good idea for all your elasticized pants and skirts.
Well, getting back to the vest, did you prepare that fabric the same way I did the purse fabric?
I did, Philip. I ironed a non-woven interfacing to the back of the fabric, and rather than sew decorative stitches, I wrote my sayings using the alphabet. Speaking of alphabets, here's a handkerchief I personalized with my monogram centered inside a medallion of hearts. This time, though, I used freezer paper to stabilize. You can buy freezer paper at any grocery store and iron it on the back using a medium, dry, hot iron. Then after you've embroidered, tear it away. I would recommend, though, testing it on some scraps of fabric before you begin your project.
Why don't we go back to the machine and have you show us how you did that?
Sure. I've already put program 135 into memory twice, engaged the single pattern key, the needle down key, and I've sewn the first 3 legs of my medallion. Now I'm ready to pivot the fabric clockwise a quarter turn and sew. My medallion is complete. I'd finish it by centering my monogram inside. Philip, is that another sample you have to share with us?
Yes, Crystal, it is. It's an old-fashioned tea towel, but today you could use it to cover bread, rolls, or cookies. I've done some embroidery work here and a Maxi Monogram. I used the template to place the monogram exactly where I wanted it. To use the template, place it onto your fabric and move it around a bit until you're satisfied with the placement, and then mark a dot at the beginning. I like to sew one letter and then mark the next. You should also use a backing behind the Maxi programs and the Maxi Monograms. Today we're going to use tearaway, which you can find at any local fabric shop. So Crystal, let's go to the machine and show them these Maxi Monograms.
The symbol for the Maxi Monogram is a capital letter A in parentheses. I'm going to select this manually, but I could also use the Creative Designer. Press the right program keys to get to the letter P. Notice that the single pattern key is lit. The Maxi Monograms can only be sewn as a single pattern and cannot be put into an M memory. I'll manually lower the needle into the mark I made. Adjust the fabric so the monogram will be sewn straight and then sew. Now I can mark the placement for the next initial and sew it just like this one.
Philip, this tea towel is so lovely and delicate looking. I do recognize program 208 that you used for the leaves, but tell me more.
Well, Crystal, I drew a circle on a square of linen. Then I used the template to angle the first set of leaves and marked it. Then I sewed around my line. Let me show you how.
Engage the single pattern key. Here's the mark for the first set of leaves. Lower the needle into the mark and sew. and angle the next set of leaves until all of them are sewn. Next, I would randomly sew 1/18 around the leaves. You can also use programs 40, 129, and 132 for the flowers. Crystal, I remember earlier that you promised to show us how to make that carousel horse.
I did, Philip, so let's begin. It's easier to do your applique on a separate piece of fabric and then construct your garment. I started by tracing my design on a piece of fusing material called Wonder Under. I then fused the Wonder Under to my satin. I cut my design out, peeled the paper backing off, and fused it to the front of my sweatshirt piece. And I used good old stitch number 12, the Zorro stitch, to go around the outside of the horse. And here, take special note of these trappings. This was done using Maxi-Stitch number 201, the large scallop, with a 1.6 twin needle. Now 1.6 refers to the distance between the two needles, so that means that these have a distance of 1.6 millimeters. That's the smallest available, by the way. If you go to a larger needle, a 2.0 for example, you must remember to engage your twin needle button, otherwise you run the risk of damaging your needle plate, your machine, or even breaking a needle.
Could you take us to the machine now and show us how to thread up properly for a double needle?
Sure. To thread the machine for twin needle sewing, pull up the extra spool holder and put the second spool on it. I threaded each spool separately as it prevents them from tangling together. I took the lower thread and brought it to the left of the tension guide and the upper thread to the right of the tension guide. The lower thread goes to the left needle guide and the upper thread to the right needle guide. You'll have to manually thread each needle since the automatic threader only goes between the two needles now. This really keeps me on my toes. Select Program 201 and your mirror image key and sew slowly and carefully. Start at the horse's chest and sew toward the tail. Now the last pattern won't completely fit in, but don't worry because the ruffle will cover it. Look at the subtle shading the two colors gave me. The reins on our carousel horse are also sewn with a Maxi-Stitch and metallic thread, which can sometimes cause problems and frustrations. But I have found through experience that using a top stitching needle will rarely cause a problem. The top stitching needle has a very long eye to accommodate the heavier thread and therefore causes less friction on the metallic thread. I even used it to satin stitch around the saddle. They're available in sizes 80 through 110. Now for the reins, I put Program 206 into memory once, and then again mirror imaged. Let's go to the machine and I'll show you how. I've used the template to mark the beginning here near the saddle. I'll lower the needle manually into that mark and position the applique under the foot. And don't forget to engage the single pattern key. This is another time I like to sew slowly so I don't put any unnecessary stress on the metallic thread. Watch. There, you can see it taking shape. And Philip, this part of the bridle was sewn with Program 58. I know you're wondering about the tail and the mane. For that I used white tulle and I cut ovals 12 inches by 3 inches. I then did a narrow rolled hem on my serger, although you could use a zigzag stitch. I then took 4 layers together and ran a basting stitch down the center. I can then pull the basting stitch together and then stitch it right into place on my applique. And Philip, this is the pillow we saw earlier when we were discussing zigzag stitches. For the stem, I used Program 04. And the leaves, well, that's a Maxi-Stitch, although I did vary the length and the width to give me some variety. And the bluebells, that's a P memory, and I used my single pattern key to sew them into place along the stem.
That was great, Crystal. I think we should go on and do some more embroidery work.
Sure. What have you got in mind?
Well, I wanted to show you this patchwork vest we have here.
Oh, Philip, that's too elegant to call patchwork, even though it is pieced. I love the way the maxi stitches give it the look and feel of a printed fabric. Did you do anything special when you embroidered it?
Well, I did use a stabilizer before doing the embroidery work, and I also cut the pattern pieces a little larger so that after doing the embroidery I had a little leeway in placement. And I've used program number 203 here, 204, 201, and Pattern Mirror 201.
And Philip, here's another idea for maxi stitches. This time they're sewn on ultra suede with metallic thread. And because I used ultra suede with 2 strands of metallic thread, that called for a little creative needling, if you will. I needed a large needle to accommodate the 2 strands of thread, but I didn't want to puncture holes in the ultra suede.
Well, how'd you solve the problem?
I found that a universal size 110 was the best for me. And also, I used a tearaway stabilizer behind this large triangular section. Then I sewed randomly program 200, and once I had those into place, I filled in with program 202. Now this strip here is an interlock knit, and it required freezer paper as a stabilizer. And on both strips, I sewed continuous rows of my pattern. Once my pieces were embroidered, then I constructed my garment. And Philip, don't you have a shirt to share with us?
Yes, I do. This little sweatshirt is a wonderful example of our 8-way feeding. Here we have the anchor combined with directional stitching to create a unique stitch. I'll give you the memory program for this. Just plug in your CD to the machine and we'll do it together. 171 and enter it once. Select program 219 and enter it 10 times. Select program number 171 and enter it once. Select program 221 and enter it 10 times. Press the memory key on the machine and you're ready to sew.
I've stabilized the fabric by ironing freezer paper onto the back. I've loosened my needle tension. Be sure to snap on foot number 8 for directional sewing. Now that everything is set, I can sew. See how easy it is to make all over embroidered fabric?
Philip, I love the way you use stitches to create your own embroidery. And I've got another example here, but this time it's a more elegant look. This is black ultra suede with gold lame thread, and I use the 8-way feed.
That's really beautiful, Crystal. Could you tell us how you did it?
Sure, Philip. I cut a strip of ultra suede 4 inches wide and 4 inches longer than my waist measurement. Because this is a very dense embroidery, I used a woven fusible interfacing. You could use a cotton chintz or gabardine and a non-woven interfacing to give the cotton more body. I then marked a line 1 1/8 inches in from one long side, and that will serve as the center of my embroidery and the center of the belt. Let's go to the machine and I'll show you how to enter the M memory sequence. Connect your CD to your machine and turn it on. Then select program 64. Using the balance key, change the pattern length to 35. Enter it once. Then select program 217 and change the length to 2.0 and enter it 5 times. Select program 64 with no changes and enter it once. Then select program 215, changing the length to 2.0 and enter it 10 times. Select program 64 with no changes and enter it once. Select program 217, changing the length to 2.0 and enter it 5 times. Press the memory key on the machine and you're ready to sew. I'm using the center of the foot and guiding it straight over the line I made previously. Watch as I sew. and the design is done. Now, the edge borders you saw on the belt were sewn with Program 58. I used the edge of the presser foot and guided it along the edge of the diamond embroidery. To finish the belt, fold under both sides and top stitch into place. Adjust the buckle and you have a finished belt.
You know, Crystal, we've sewn an awful lot on this machine today. I know it could use a good cleaning and oiling.
That's right. Taking proper care of your machine will give you much better performance and stitch quality. And since you mentioned it, Philip, you can have the honors.
Well, thanks a lot, Crystal. To clean your machine, you can either use the brush that came with it, or you can use a soft paintbrush. I actually use both.
Open the cover and drop the feed dogs. This makes it a little easier to take off the needle plate. Now tilt the needle plate up at the back and remove it. Clean the feed dogs, making sure to clean in between the teeth. Now remove the bobbin case and with the soft brush, clean all the parts in the sewing hook area. Be especially careful to gently brush the lint from the thread sensor monitor. I even take a look at the inside of the bobbin case because lint can collect there also. Now you can oil the hook raceway. Place just a drop there. You should oil your machine about every 8 hours of sewing time. To replace the needle plate, place the left side down first, then snap in the right side. That's all there is to it. But do remember to raise your feed dogs.
Well, Philip, our time is just about up for this volume. I know you've learned a lot about your 1475 CD, and I hope we've inspired you to experiment with all the possibilities the machine offers.
Well, I think we have, Crystal. I know we've both enjoyed showing you these ideas, and in Volume 2 we'll move on to more advanced techniques.
Especially how to trace and touch your own designs. So until then, bye-bye.
See you soon.